This part of Module 1 focuses on the calculation scheme of AquaCrop. In AquaCrop, crop yield is simulated in 4 steps. Step number 1, crop development. In step number 2, crop transpiration is simulated. Step number 3, biomass production. And finally, yield formation in step number 4. So let's start with the crop development. When simulating crop development, AquaCrop describes the development expansion of the canopy cover, which is above ground, as well as the development of the root zones, which is below the ground. A lot of models use leaf area index. AquaCrop does not use leaf area index, but use green canopy cover, CC. CC is the ratio between the soil surface covered by the green canopy cover over the unit ground surface. When the sun is directly above the crop, you will see on the soil a shadow, here indicated in purple. That is the soil surface covered by the green canopy. And CC is the ratio of the soil surface covered by the green canopy over the unit ground surface. So it ranges from 0 when we have a bare soil to 1 when you have full canopy cover. Or normally it is expressed in percentage from 0% to 100%. Here we see the canopy development in function of time of winter wheat in Belgium. The wheat is sown before winter at the end of October, and at germination you hardly can see the crop. The canopy cover is only 3%. After the winter, early spring, the canopy starts to develop, and on the 16th of March it was noted that we have 90% canopy cover. 1 month later, already the canopy cover reached already 75%, and 1 month later we are already at 90%. Canopy development for non-limiting conditions is described in AquaCrop with only a few crop parameters. We have to know the moment when the maximum canopy cover is reached, and then by means of a logistic type equation, AquaCrop describes the development of the canopy between germination and the moment maximum canopy cover is reached. At the end of the season, when senescence kicks in, the canopy cover will decline. So with a few parameters, which are crop characteristics, which is an input, AquaCrop knows how the crop develops under non-limiting conditions. Throughout the season, the conditions are not necessarily non-limiting. For example, water stress in the root zone might limit canopy development. To describe water stress, AquaCrop simulates the soil-water balance. In a schematic way, the root zone is depicted as a reservoir in which the water content will vary depending on the input and output of water. If there is a lot of rainfall or irrigation, the water content in the root zone will increase and will come above field capacity. This will result in deep percolation. In the absence of rainfall and irrigation, the water content in the root zone will drop and the crop becomes under stress. When wilting point is reached, the crop will die. Now, to describe the effect of water stresses on canopy development, AquaCrop considers various thresholds. The first threshold is a threshold for leaf expansion, which is indicated here by the green line. As soon as the water content drops below the green line, the crop experiences water stress, resulting in a slower leaf expansion than described by the crop parameters. There is a second threshold, canopy senescence, given by the yellow line, which is close to wilting point. If the water content drops below the yellow line, the canopy starts to die off. Let us have now a look how canopy cover is simulated in AquaCrop. When you start AquaCrop, you get the main menu. Main menu consists of two panels. In the top panel, the environment and the crop is described. What type of climate we are, what is the crop, how is the management, on what soil the crop is simulated. In the bottom panel, we have several options to change the simulations, and there is the Run button, which I'm going to click now to start the AquaCrop. Now I'm here in the simulation run, and I will start the simulation by clicking on the Start button. I will advance by 10 days. 10 days, I continue, another 10 days, I continue, and I continue. So my simulation has advanced 40 days. In the Run menu, I can see three panels. One TR is for crop transpiration, one CC is for the canopy development, and one DR is the root zone depletion panel. In the root zone depletion panel, I can see that the water content has declined. We can also see that the root zone is expanding, the reservoir becomes bigger, but the amount of water, which is given by the blue part, is declining. Now we have several thresholds, as you remember. There is that green line, and that is the threshold for canopy expansion. It means if the water content drops below the green line, then the canopy expansions will slow down. And that is what we can see here in the second panel, the CC panel, where the green canopy cover is simulated. In gray is indicated how the canopy cover should have been developed if there was no water stress. However, due to water stress, the canopy expansion slows down as soon as the soil water content drops below the green line. And it slows down so much that even the canopy expansion is stopped around day 30. Now, if I irrigate, for example, I will add 150 millimeters of water, and now I'm going to advance with 1 day. If I click now on continue, that water is added in the root zone. I am above field capacity, and immediately the canopy cover starts to increase. If I continue my simulation, the excess water drains out of the root zone, but canopy is still at full speed. Now, when I drop below the green line, canopy cover starts to slow down again, and if I'm too far below the green line, it even stops. Now, if I continue, the water content in the root zone will drop below the yellow line, and senescence starts kicking in, and we see that the canopy cover dies off. And at day 110, I have no longer any canopy cover. In gray, it is indicated how the canopy cover should have developed, while in green, the real canopy cover is simulated, how it develops in this particular environment. When starting a simulation, you select a crop and you know how the canopy development will be for non-limiting conditions, as well as how the root development should expand when there are no water stresses. At runtime, AquaCrop will detect water stresses by simulating for each day the soil water balance. If the water content in the root zone drops below the green line, leaf expansion will slow down. If it drops below the yellow line, canopy senescence will kick in. By considering the stresses at any day of the season, AquaCrop will simulate the actual canopy development. The same is true for the root development, where other stress levels determines the root zone expansion. So this concludes the description of the simulation of canopy cover in step number 1. After the simulation of crop development in step number 1, we move now to the simulation of crop transpiration in step number 2. Crop transpiration consists of the vaporization of liquid water and the vapor removal to the atmosphere. It is proportional to Cc. To simulate transpiration, AquaCrop uses the Kc ET0 method. ET0 is reference evapotranspiration. It expresses the evaporating power of the atmosphere, which is dictated by the weather conditions, and it multiplied with a Kc. Kc is a crop coefficient which characterizes the transpiring crop. The crop coefficient is proportional to Cc, to the green canopy cover. When we have a lot of canopy, Kc will be large and transpiration will be large. When Cc is small, Kc is small and transpiration is limited. So the Kc is proportional to the green canopy cover, and the proportional factor depends on the crop type and expresses how the transpired crop differs from my reference grass crop. This is the simulation of transpiration when there is no water stress. So, knowing the canopy cover in step 1, we can now simulate the transpiration by multiplying ET0 with a Kc factor which is proportional to Cc. However, water stress might close stomata. This is simulated once again by considering the soil-water balance. We have already two thresholds, one with the green line used for simulating leaf expansion, and the one with the yellow line used to simulate canopy senescence. We will add now a third threshold, which is the one for stomatal closure. As soon as the soil water content drops below the red line, stomata start to close and transpiration is reduced. This is simulated with the help of a water stress factor, a Ks factor. So when the water content in the root zone drops below the red line, Ks becomes smaller than 1 and transpiration is limited. When wilting point is reached, Ks becomes 0 and transpiration is 0. So let's return to our AquaCrop simulations, in which we simulated water stress, and after 40 days the canopy development was completely stopped. Let's now focus on the top panel, the panel for crop transpiration. In gray, it indicates how much water could have been transpired given the actual canopy development. However, we see starting at day 30, the water content dropped below the red line. The red line was the threshold for stomatal closure, and the transpiration starts to be reduced. After applying 150 millimeters of water and advancing my simulation with a time step of 1 day, the canopy starts to expand again and transpiration is optimal. As soon as the water content drops below the green line, the water stress limits canopy expansion, which is given here. Canopy expansion reduced by 1%, although the stomatal closure is not affected because the water content is still above the red line. It's only when the water content drops below the red line, then stomata start to close and I have a reduction of 1% in transpiration. If I continue, the water content will drop below the yellow line, early senescence kicks in, and stomata is now already closed by 80%. If I continue my simulation, my canopy will die off at day 110, far before the end of the growing season. So in the graph of transpiration, in gray, it shows me how much water could have been transpired given the green canopy cover. However, the real transpiration is indicated in blue and is less due to stomatal closure. After the simulation of crop development and crop transpiration, let's now focus in step number 3 on the biomass production. Crop takes up water by the roots, and that water is transported to the leaves where it escapes as water vapor through the stomata. Now this same pathway is used to take up CO2. And by photosynthesis, the CO2 will be converted in carbohydrates, which are the building blocks of the biomass. So we see there is a direct link between crop transpiration and biomass production. So when we have a well-developed crop, non-water stressed, a lot of water will escape through the stomata, and at the same time a lot of CO2 can be taken up. When the crop canopy is small and the crop is water stressed, transpiration will be small as well, and biomass production will be limited as well. Now that direct relationship between transpiration and biomass is given by the biomass water productivity, which gives the slope of the line in the transpiration biomass curve. So when in the first month a certain amount of water is transpired, given the slope of the line, the biomass production is known. If in the second month the crop is poorly developed, water stress limits the crop transpiration and less biomass is produced. In month number 3, there was a lot of rainfall, the crop could develop strongly, it transpired a lot, and also a lot of biomass was produced. In these slides we see for several crops the linearity between the cumulative amount of water which has been transpired and the biomass production. In yellow for sorghum, in green sunflower, blue for chickpea and red for wheat. Each time we see a linear relationship, although the slopes of the lines are different. The slopes of the line expresses the water productivity. Now the slope of the line does not only differ between the crops, but also between different climates. So in different climates, in more colder temperate climates, for example, the slopes of the line will be different than in more tropical climates. Therefore, AquaCrop does not use water productivity as such, but he will normalize the water productivity for the climate. That normalization is done by dividing the daily amount of water transpired by the daily amount of ET0. So the cumulative transpiration corrected for ET0 is plotted versus the biomass. And once again, we see straight lines. The yellow line for sorghum. Of course, the slope in the normalized graph is different than in the non-normalized graph. Secondly, we will see that crops will group. The green is for the sunflower, the red was for the wheat, and the blue is for the chickpea. And we see that the crop, they group together in classes. We have a water productivity normalized, which is typical for C3, which is lower than the normalized water productivity for the C4 crops. This slide shows you the normalized water productivity for maize in different environments. In those environments, the climatic conditions are different, and also different varieties of maize might have been cultivated. Nevertheless, we found that the normalized water productivity in all those climates, in all those environments, is very similar. So, given the amount of water transpired in step 2, we can calculate the biomass production by knowing what is the water productivity for the crop. It is the normalized water productivity for the crop. And so we calculate in step number 3 the amount of biomass produced. Let us return to the simulation in AquaCrop. So far we have discussed the canopy development and crop transpiration. As the simulation advances, the user can see at the top of the screen the variation in the daily biomass production. If transpiration is large, the daily biomass increase is large. If transpiration is small, the amount of biomass produced on one day will be smaller as well. The last step in the calculation scheme of AquaCrop is yield formation. The simulated above-ground biomass integrates all photosynthetic products which were assimilated by the crop during the season. By using a harvest index, which is a fraction of the biomass, that is the harvestable product, crop yield is obtained from the biomass. With the help of a harvest index, AquaCrop will derive crop yield from the biomass. During the season, the harvest index might vary from its reference value. The variation depends on the timing and the extent of water and heat stresses. When returning to the simulation run in AquaCrop, we will find the final crop yield, which was produced at the end of the season, at the top of the screen. To summarize this presentation, we can clearly see in this slide that AquaCrop simulates crop yield in 4 steps. Step number 1, canopy cover. Once canopy cover is known, transpiration is simulated by considering the CC. Biomass is derived from transpiration with the help of the normalized water productivity. Finally, in step 4, crop yield is derived from biomass by means of the harvest index.